Prepare to wax on and wax off for the final time as Johnny Torch reviews Cobra Kai Season 6, the final chapter. Well, welcome into another Johnny Torch review. This one is a long time coming. I feel like I'm probably the last person to review this show now. Sadly, a lot of things got in the way. The show came out. By the time I finished watching it, it was my birthday. Things were happening. And then, with Daredevil Born Again coming out, which I plan on reviewing that show when it's completely completed and finished, didn't really have time to do this review and make it timely, where, you know, I could have probably gotten a lot more views. Maybe the faithful Cobra Kai fans will continue to search for reviews and you'll find this one. To begin the review, I have been a huge fan of this show. And I've reviewed all the other seasons and the first two segments of this season. So I could not let the show pass into that good night without my reviewing the final chapter. Um, Again, this is me literally burning the midnight oil, so it is literally almost 1:30 a.m. But I wanted to make sure I got this video in. Apologies if hopefully I won't forget anything because I just rewatched the show for the second time, uh, and truly they aced it. I mean, honestly, just to give a quick review before spoilers, which again at this point I think everybody who was going to see the show has seen it, but honestly, everything happened the way it should have happened. Honestly, there was only one or two things we'll get to that I was a little unsure about, but honestly, everything happened the way it should have happened. Everybody ended up where they were supposed to be, the way you felt that they were supposed to be at the end of the show. And it's good to just have a happy ending for once, where pretty much everybody got what they deserved. You know what I mean? And I was quite happy with it. The downside, if I was to say anything negative about this final part of the season, is that it was kind of predictable. I really didn't think that anything that happened wasn't going to happen from the beginning. I was pretty sure, again, with one or two exceptions, the way everything was going to turn out, and it did. But saying that, I'm still happy. I wanted to see everything that happened the way it did, and it didn't disappoint me. So there's that. All right, let's talk about. I'm not going to take the episodes one by one. This is just basically an overview of the final segment of the season, but we'll do a little, catch up here history. Um, the Saikai Taikai ended with the death of what was his name? Quan, and the show re-begins with the tournament is over, and it's like the aftermath, and Daniel is kind of still stewing over what happened. Johnny's not satisfied really with his place as a test driver in Daniel's car emporium. Um, Terry Silver, of course, still wants the tournament on, so he ends up finding a way to get Johnny's ear, get him interested in coming back. He's convinced the owner or whatever of the Saikai Taikai to continue on, and they have to get Daniel on board. Kreese is on board, and I wasn't really I wasn't a fan. I wasn't too fond of like Terry supposedly dying of a disease, and they kind of used that to up the stakes. so that they could believe him that he just wanted to go out winning the Saikai Taikai, and that would have been his, you know, going out in a blaze of glory. But again, that didn't really end up meaning anything by the end. We'll get to that in a second. So the Saikai Taikai is back on. Um, Sam sort of coaxes Tori to come back. Tori kind of doesn't want anything to do with it anymore, especially since she's the only member of Cobra Kai that is still, you know, in it. The students of Sensei Kim, they don't return. This is a little something that was a little confusing to me. Now, in the I think it's the first episode, the first or second episode, we have Kreese going back with Sensei Kim to Korea, I think it is, and they're um it is a very interesting thing that happens there. I kind of This is another thing that I kind of expected. They set it up. They kind of want you to believe that she's going to end up killing Kreese so that she can take on her role as the ultimate head of Cobra Kai. And of course she ends up killing her grandfather. Um Grandmaster Kim, I guess his name is. Um like I said, I saw that coming. I knew that was going to happen, and again, it was for the best. But again, I didn't really understand why she sort of didn't have anything left to do in this storyline. The reason, really, that she is kind of written out is because we didn't really need her anymore. And I guess the idea is that she was going to put her style of karate on whatever that Cobra Kai Korean wing was going to be. So that was interesting. And then Kreese returns. Um, Again, I don't want to go through it episode by episode, but you know, we to tie up those storylines, we have Chosen on a like blind date set up by Amanda and Daniel, and he, I was a little disappointed that they weren't going to bring back Kumiko and have that happy ending between her and Chosen. But I mean, there's only so many happy endings that everybody can have that it would begin to feel a little strained. So I don't think that was a bad idea, really. And at the end, when you do the final montage, we see Chosen ends up reconnecting with Sensei Kim. So it's sort of a happy ending for Chosen. I felt like he got, you know, pretty much an equal in Sensei Kim. I thought that was a pretty good finale for him. And again, he that actor, he's been great this entire time. I mean, he went from the baddest of the bad in Karate Kid Part 2, which is still my favorite chapter of the Karate Kid saga. And he became just this lovable guy. He's just this lovable guy that was, everybody liked in the show. I mean, I challenge anybody to say anything bad about Chosen. He was just great at the end of this. And he was they were smart to involve him all the way through. Like, for instance, I was a little disappointed we didn't get too much from Bad Boy Barnes. I guess there was only so much they could do with so many senseis. We had Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang, and trying to sort of build Bad Boy Barnes into it probably would have been a little bit more difficult. But again, Bad Boy Barnes is in this season, but he doesn't really show up again in the last act. Um, let's talk about. There was a lot of well, first we'll get to the domestic part before we sort of wind up into the Saikai Taikai. But we, of course, Johnny ends up getting married, and they have the baby named after his mother. We get a flashback to Johnny on hard times. I think it was 2017. They said, and he was faced with possibly going to prison for beating up some guy or something in a Applebee's. One of the things that was interesting to me about that scene, and of course I don't remember some of the early seasons as well, but I was under the impression that you know Johnny's mother passed on a lot earlier. It says on the tombstone 2007, which means Johnny was way into adulthood by that point, and I don't really know what her feelings would have been that Johnny was in Cobra Kai and that he was beating up Daniel all that time. And we never really get to see from that point of view because, you kind of think when you watch the original Karate Kid, at least my conception was that probably Johnny was from a broken home. Sort of the dad's not really there for him. The mother is just sort of like watching TV or something. She doesn't really care. But then they sort of turn that on its head with the actual story where his mother sort of marries this rich guy, Ed Asner, and they don't really connect. Ed Asner sadly passed on by the time this season was done, and they did make mention of him in this, at the end of this season. But I just feel like there was like a lost chapter in there somewhere where we really don't get too much information about what happened with Johnny's mother and what she thought about all that, because we do get Daniel's mother, of course, in the original Karate Kid, and we get uh, Allie's mother and father in the show, in the movie, sort of giving us her family's background. We don't get that with Johnny, and so they didn't really. I think maybe they could have fleshed that out a little more in the show with flashbacks had they decided to do that. Johnny and Carmen's wedding. It was good to see. Uh, they had an actual Cobra Kai member marry them. That was pretty apropos. And it's one of those TV style weddings where it was like, they get married in the hospital and stuff like that. It felt like, felt very much like a 50s sitcom type thing. But again, it was very heartwarming. And the family relationship there, it's really amazing the way that shaped up, because when you started the series, it was basically Miguel and Robbie at each other's throats. And by the time the series ended, they're literally brothers. You know what I mean? It really was an amazing way that they did that. And I think they tried to do something like that with Samantha and Tori, especially in these later episodes, that they tried to make them sort of like sisters. And for me it worked. It seems like there's a lot of criticism of Samantha especially, but I think she more than tried to make amends with Tori. And of course, Tori was no angel in the whole situation either. But because we know more about her coming from sort of a disadvantaged family, like something I expected from Johnny, the sympathy sort of was to gravitate towards Tori. But so let's get to the Saikai Taikai, and we have Robbie and Sam going to be taking on their opponents, which was Zara and Gunther, I think. Yeah, so this was pretty interesting. Again, I I I like the twists, but it didn't really completely surprise me because at the core of it, Sam really was going to reflect Daniel's teaching, who of course was going to reflect Mr. Miyagi's teaching. And so the idea of her like not wanting to compete and sort of wanting to give Tori the chance, which is pretty much what she needed, it made sense, and I kind of liked that, and I at least understood it, because just to have another Sam Tori match really wasn't gonna amount to much. And you have two baby faces facing each other. That's the most boring thing in the world. Tori made her turn to the dark side, and everybody knew that she was just doing it under some form of duress. She really felt like she had no alternatives at that point. It was a drama thing, and so having two baby faces fight was not gonna mean anything. And you can have two heels fight, but two baby faces, it's never gonna stick. It's gonna be boring. So I understood that. I was a little less um enthusiastic about Robbie losing that fight, because he honestly has never won a fight beyond, I guess, the school fight where Miguel was sent off the rails into the ground. And I kind of felt like it was owed to him, Robbie, to win a big one. And the two things that stuck out was, well, they're going to give Miguel the win because he's the star of the show. And I've always said, again, I like Zolo and the character of Miguel. This is not coming from a place of dislike, but he's typically the most boring, if I may use that term, character on the show, Miguel. He's a great actor, and again, the character is great, but it's like he's only ever really there just to win the tournament. I mean, he doesn't really have a horse in the race. They even tried to kind of give him a horse in the race, saying, well, he's not going to get into a good college if he doesn't show good in the Saikai Taikai. It's like, well, that's kind of like that's kind of like a white collar problem. I mean, at the beginning of the season, Robbie can barely get into a school for labor or something like that, and it's like it just kind of felt like he was the one that needed the boost the same way that Tori needed the boost, but because Miguel is the star, they're not going to give Robbie the boost. And I think the other thing I didn't like too much about this season, where it comes to that about Robbie getting taken out, you know, it kind of reminded me of they always try to do parallels with the original movies, and Gunther though doesn't get disqualified. He continues on, and Robbie is like taken out, and then Robbie, he's like, he has to learn to accept the fact that he's not going to even get a chance to compete. I feel like this whole season was built up to give Johnnie that do-over. You know what I mean? He got that chance after whatever it was, 40 years, to step into the square again, take his chance to finally win and make it right that you know, he lost on the big stage. And now Robbie's not going to get that. And it's like, well, like father, like son, right? But what do we have to wait for like 40 years to see if Robbie can win some huge tournament again or something? I kind of feel like it was owed to him in this show to do it and not have to wait like his dad did, because his dad had to wait, but his dad still gets the top trophy at the end of this episode, at the end of this series. Well, we get to more about that in a second. All right, so we've got Tori versus Zara. That was a great fight, and you know the comeuppance for Zara was, everybody was hoping to see it. And I think the fight between Miguel and Gunther was pretty good too. But the thing is I was expecting them to go full Rocky 4 with Gunther. I thought they were going to do the whole, I fight for me thing, because Sensei Wolf is just basically like beating him and berating him. And I thought he was just going to finally flip out on him. But again, we needed Wolf in order for the big finish. The other thing, of course, I want to touch on before we get to the very end, we got Kreese and Johnnie, and the real emotional weight of that relationship is finally brought to bear. And I like the way they resolved things with Kreese and with Silver. But Kreese ends up getting redemption. This is the thing that was kind of interesting to me, because I was saying before, I think in the previous part of the season, that I don't think necessarily Kreese and Silver need to be, they don't need to end the series as bad guys. You know what I mean? They don't need to be heels. They just need to learn something. And I feel like Kreese learning something wasn't a bad thing. I think that was a good way to end it. And like the emotion that they actually had to face between Kreese and Johnnie with what happened that night in the parking lot, and Kreese trying to make good on that was really powerful for fans of the original, because I never thought that they would ever make up. You know what I mean? It's like one of these things where Kreese, he's really he's old now. Let's be honest. Martin Cove is getting up there, and you can tell. And it was always going to be difficult to try to keep the show going. With him only getting older, that he would be able to be a danger. So when they have the fight on the boat with him and Silver, who they're supposed to be comparable ages, of course, everybody knows that um, Silver, the actor, is actually roughly the same age as Ralph Macchio. So they're supposed to be like maybe 5 years apart, Kreese and Silver, but in reality, there's like 20 years there. So it's supposed to be two older guys fighting on this boat. And the way they ended was, I thought was a pretty good stalemate because I didn't really want to see Kreese beat Silver. I didn't really want to see Silver beat Kreese. And part of the reason why I didn't want to see Kreese beat Silver is because that's another one of those things where, all right, Kreese has paid his dues and he's made amends and he's tried to do, he's tried to do some things. He's really turned his life around. You know, he's been a grandfather to Tori this whole time, pretty much. You know, he's been a sensei to her that he couldn't be to Johnnie. And he has to make peace with Johnnie about that. And that was really good. But at the same time, he was the malignant force that brought Silver back. Silver was really, he was content being like a rich fop, doing nothing but, hanging out in his mansion and eating his quiche or whatever it was when John met him again. And he really ruined Silver's life. And so I don't really feel like it would have been fair just for Kreese to be the hero at the end of this and he takes out Silver and all. Well, so I was really happy when it ended in a stalemate and they both go up in flames. And again, this is kind of a heightened reality. I mean, there's always the possibility they both survived if they want to bring this back, which, I think in some form or another, they will bring back some of these characters of Cobra Kai. But I thought that was a fitting end for both of them, if that's in fact where it ends. They were back in the beginning in Vietnam and all the time they spent together and this and that. It feels like this was appropriate send off for both of them. All right, so again, before we get to the resolution here, there was a couple other things I want to talk about. It was good to see they brought back Daniel's mother. It's important that they involve her as much as they can, especially since the actress is still alive, because she did have an important part in the first movie, and she had like a minor cameo in the third movie, completely written out of the second movie. And she's the one that provides the resolution to the Mr. Miyagi mystery. And we get a dream sequence where Daniel and Miyagi is fighting skeletons in the closet, I guess, come to life, made actual in the real physical world. And I thought this was a pretty good role, a pretty good scene and a role for Miyagi to sort of be mentor once again. And I think putting him into it as a CGI character wasn't a bad thing because we needed his presence. And as the show went on, it started with just, well, they mention him and then they show a picture of him and then they kind of built to the place now where we could say that he was like actually physically there, perhaps in spirit, but he was kind of, his presence was felt more on a concrete scale. And I like that. And the resolution of, well, Mr. Miyagi beat up a guy and stole something from him or whatever, and the story ends up coming out that it was actually his mother's necklace, and he beat up the guy because the guy stole it from him, and he gave it to Daniel's mother to give to Sam. So I felt that it was a good resolution, but it's one of those things that, like, I don't think it came out of left field, but nobody would have really expected this. It's not as bad as, like, for instance, the Spider-Man 3, the glider that, your father was, where it really comes out of left field. At least in this case, it felt like, you know, Daniel's mother didn't know what was going on, and she just happened to have said the right thing at the right time to sort of put everything in perspective for everyone in the audience and especially Daniel. They gave Amanda some good scenes, some good lines. Nice to see Robbie's mother, in the show, however briefly as well. I kind of feel like, if anything, they didn't really showcase her redemption arc, so to speak. But there's only so much room you have for all these things. A lot of the other kids are in the background. We really didn't get to see a lot of geez, what is it, Nate and Bert and all those guys. But we did, we get the final cap on the binary bros, which was good because for a time there they were at odds, and it just didn't feel, it just didn't feel right. But I guess Dimitri changes his plans to go to the same university as Hawk. So that's a happy ending there as well. The ending, the other one that I wasn't too sure about, I was saying how I didn't care for um, Robbie's ending there, so to speak. I didn't really understand the bringing Sam to Okinawa because, in a way, I can understand it. I don't think they really wanted to have that, you know, kissy face Romeo and Juliet ending with, Sam and Miguel going off hand in hand. They wanted to show that there was going to be some, because in the way that Daniel, the way life turned out for him with Allie, you kind of feel like in this case they were trying to do something like that, where they didn't want to end the series making you think that they were the sure thing together. In fact, you kind of expect them to break up, but Miguel sort of, again, they pulled that sort of Karate Kid Part 2 thing where he's like, "Oh, I'm going to wait for college and they're going to wait for me and I'm going to go with you to Okinawa for a few months or something." And, it gives you this sort of happy ending. At the same time, you kind of feel that this relationship ain't going to go that far with them being on, opposite sides of the map. So that was interesting. I'm not sure that I like that, but it kind of was like they didn't really know what else to do with Sam. They didn't really want her to be the you know, the star's girlfriend, so to speak. They sort of wanted to have her go elsewhere. And again, I don't know that it's a bad thing, but it kind of felt off. Robbie and Tori, of course, they get their big, you know, time in the spotlight, their payday, I guess, so to speak, which was nice to see that they were two kids that were, they were, their livelihoods were pretty much taken away once they, you know, were in the Saikai Taikai, but they still managed to, make something of themselves afterwards, which was really nice. And well, let's finish up with Johnny's story. Of course, there's the big training montage with Daniel, and you know, the one thing that was kind of phony to me was the backstage, the locker room thing between Wolf and Johnny. I kind of felt like that was overdone because I don't think Johnny's the type to let somebody get into his head, and I really don't think that you know, it's kind of like in the original Karate Kid when the Cobra Kai guys came in the locker room, and it's like you only get like a minute or two there. You really can't monologue about and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and your family's gonna be disappointed and this and that. I kind of felt like they carried it on a little too far, and then have them get into an altercation a little bit there. I don't know. I mean, that to me was a little bit off, but the idea was that Johnny had to be, sort of doubting himself. He's an older guy now. Wolf is still in his prime, and I like this concept where they had the sensei's fight, because I was kind of feeling like at some point I want to see, either Daniel or Johnny or somebody get into into the ring again, so to speak. And obviously the show really is for Johnny. He's the star of the show, and it was really about his redemption. So I knew I didn't know that they were going to do this with him being the one that gets in the ring, but once he got in the ring, I knew this is what it was all going to be about. And again, it felt like, well, the show was called Cobra Kai. It felt like they were going to aim at a certain point of bringing back Cobra Kai. Johnny was going to be in charge. They're all going to be in the black geese, and seeing Daniel in the black gi again was, the Cobra Kai logo on his back. It feels like in a way things came full circle, and now to end it that way, was really satisfactory. And before we get to the ending, of course, um, Johnny, you know, Daniel having to train Johnny in a very Apollo Rocky way, and they really did, and they did right by that storyline. And of course, the "You're the Best" song, which I knew they were waiting for the end of the show to bring that back. Just great. That was just a magical scene. And when Johnny is like I said, he's kind of a little old. He's a little past his prime, a little bit out of shape to do this kind of fight with a younger guy, and he's sort of out of it. And Daniel's the one that really puts him back into focus, and it just goes to show that's where his strength is to be a good sensei. And Johnny is like a better fighter than Sensei, and Daniel was the one to really bring out what Johnny needed to hear, and Chosen knew this, and so again he was very wise too in this, saying how to handle him, tell him what he needs to hear. And I thought that was very good too. I always said I thought that the last line should be, "You're all right, LaRusso," and that Johnny would sort of be acknowledging that, Daniel wasn't just some, cream puff or whatever, and because he helped him win the Saikai Taikai. But they turned it the other way. They made it where Daniel says, "You're all right, Lawrence." Again, it feels right. I thought it was going to be the other way, but I mean, it works. It feels right. And they both stand there with the trophy this time. It's not just one or the other. And it just goes to show that, even though Johnny was, at least to most normal people, the antagonist of the first film, that he has this long arc, that he wasn't really a bad guy in the first movie, the original movie. He really wasn't a bad guy through most of the series. But, he finally breaks out into his own here and becomes the sensei that he should have been, had his life not taken that dive after the fight. Another interesting thing that I think of sometimes by watching the fights in the show is that they keep taking kicks to the head and it counts as points, but then later on, previously in the beginning of the series, they're always talking about how Daniel used an illegal kick and Johnny lost and he really shouldn't have. But then again, when you watch the show, everybody's taking kicks to the face, everybody's getting punched in the face. I don't know where that lays now, but hey, that's where it goes. All right, so again, the way the show ended, of course, we get a little cameo of Stingray again. He's hilarious. I thought he was great. But the way the show ends was just perfect. We've got Daniel still going to train students in the Miyagi-Do manner, and he's going to share those students also with Johnny, who's going to be teaching the Cobra Kai style. And again, it's Johnny's the offense, Daniel's the defense, and it's bringing both Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai teachings together to merge. And I think that's what they were trying to do for the last couple seasons. And again, it's nice to see that you know, it doesn't end there. I was kind of afraid they were going to go with a ambiguous ending of, well, Johnny's going back to Cobra Kai and Daniel's going back to selling cars, and Chosen goes back to Okinawa. But honestly, this feels like they could just do another season, and say maybe a year or two from now they'll do another season, and it would feel like they could just pick up. And that's kind of what I wanted from this. I didn't want it to be like, well, they got that out of their system. Daniel's going back to selling cars, but it feels like they turned the Miyagi-Do Cobra Kai stuff into a legacy now, where it'll continue on, and they will be an important part of it. And that's, to put a cap on it, like I've always said when I review the show, this is the best show, of any movie series or TV series or anything who has tried to resurrect a dormant franchise and do something with it in later years. This is the most successful. I mean, Star Wars, the sequel trilogy, it was a disaster. You have the Creed films, which is picking up the threads from the Rocky movies. It's so. It's decent, but it doesn't really play to all the characters and legacy. And that's kind of what this has done, which has been so good. And I give so much credit to those guys, the three guys that have uh, ran with this show from the beginning, is that, they know that we're here to see Johnny and Daniel. They know that we love the side characters like Chosen and Kreese and Silver. And they're found a way to build them all into this in an integral way, all the while showcasing the next generation. And they gave us interesting next generation characters. None of them were perfect. A lot of them were changing allegiances almost at will. You had Robbie. You thought that he was like a little punk at the beginning. He turns out to be a real sweetheart. You got Miguel. You got Samantha. Everybody thinks she's daddy's girl, and then she turns out to be a little bit more spiteful, and then she's coming back the other way. And then there's Tori, and you think she's a troublemaker, but then again, really, she's got a hard time in her life and she's trying to deal with it. I mean, there's just so many layers to all these characters. I mean, Hawk, um the metamorphosis he goes through from the first time we see him to where he is. Dimitri, who would have even thought that he would be able to put on a gi, let alone, win some important matches. So again, it's like you've given us characters that are worth getting invested in. And that's one of the key things when you're going to do a next generation series, is you have to give us the characters we all know and love. You don't sideline them. You don't say, oh, here's your 2 episodes with so and so, and he's going to die pretty soon, and we're not going to deal with him again. And here's the new characters. You have to build up the new characters in light of the old characters. You got to introduce them to us. Some other characters that didn't even get the biggest spotlight were enjoyable. I mean, Anthony, I think we could do a season on him to see where he is now by the end of this show, because he went through a metamorphosis himself. You have Kenny, same thing. Um, a lot of them, Devin, a lot of them really could use some more time that we could spend with them to just see what's going on with them and how they came so far. That's kind of the new class at the end of it, is like Kenny, Devin, and Anthony. And they sort of tease that they're, going to be training them for future tournaments and so forth. And I thought that was a good ending, though. They kind of ended it with Daniel and the chopsticks. That's the classic Miyagi scene with Daniel and Miyagi and the chopsticks. So to wrap this one up, this whole Megillah, I'm going to say Cobra Kai season 6. Final. Now, should I rate this as a final season? If I rate it as a final season, I'll do both. But these last 5 episodes, I'll say it gets 5 stars. 5 stars out of 5 for the final 5 episodes. If we do the whole season 6 as a whole, I don't think the second batch of episodes, the second portion of the season, the second act, if you will, I don't think that was as strong. And maybe the first, I don't know. If I was to rank them, I guess I would say maybe the third, first, and second part of the season. I put them in that order. But I mean, altogether, I would probably say maybe 4 stars out of 5 if we're going to do the whole 6th season. But for the most part, it was really enjoyable. And for the most part, everything happened the way it was supposed to. I guess I would say an A. I would give this last season an A, maybe not an A plus, because like I said, there was a couple of things. There's a couple of things I didn't like. I mean, they had Dimitri and Yasmin making up. I didn't really like that subplot where Demetrius gets, that full of himself and stuff. That didn't make any sense to me. There was a couple of things of Robbie and Zara. I mean, they did some like teenage shenanigans that I think brought it down like a point or half a point maybe in the second season. I mean, the second part of the season. But yeah, overall strong season. Probably 9 out of 10 if you want to do the whole season as a whole. And of course, we've got Karate Kid Legends coming up. I'm torn over whether I want to see the film in theaters. I mean, I don't know. It's got Ralph Macchio, but it probably has next to no ties to the Cobra Kai series. I think if anything, Ralph Macchio is probably going to have a role akin to what Sylvester Stallone had in the Creed films. He's probably going to be, you know, introduced halfway through, have like two or three big scenes, and then he's kind of going to be window dressing at the end. I don't know, but we'll wait and see how that goes. But let me know what you think about Cobra Kai. You sad to see it end like me? I mean, I guess all things come to an end, and it went out on top. It was really successful from beginning to end. I don't think there were any, you know, overly weak seasons. I think, geez, if I was to rank the seasons, I don't know if I can do that right now off the top of my head, but I think the show progressively got better as the seasons went on. So it is pretty much a case of the latter seasons really working really good, to me anyway, over some of the earlier seasons. But again, it was a buildup that needed to be sort of, the mounting excitement and pressure of seeing things like Kreese coming in the second season, Silver coming in the season after that. It was a building uh, feature, and the progress kept going and going until finally we're at this culmination of the series with this big explosion at the end with the Saikai Taikai and the world stage. So let me know what you think about Cobra Kai season 6. What do you think about, how would you rank the seasons? Let me know all this in the chat below. And until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.